you know, a doctor and companion who were at the height of their powers. You had a script editor who had brought in such new, fresh energy into the show, and new writers and had a vision for the show, which was really exciting. And it kind of fizzes off the screen. And you know, you had new directors like Chris, who just brought in their own, you know, very different, fresh vision for the show. So it was a really exciting era, and a producer who was constantly kind of fighting to keep the show alive and keep it on air. And you know, we might have lost one of the stories from the season if it wasn't for him fighting for it in the middle of an asbestos crisis. So, you know, you had all this brilliant team working on the show, but they never had time and they never had money. It was so kind of under-budgeted, the show at the time. So I've always felt that, and with season 25 in particular, and the Happiness Patrol, I've loved as a story, but it's somewhat underrated, I think, because it really suffered due to, or a couple of reasons, due to the budget and the fact that they had to realise an alien planet in, you know, 3 corridors television centre, which they managed to do quite well, but, you know, we were able to kind of give them a bit of help this time. And, you know, they had an incredible guest cast, like Sheila Hancock, just astonishing.
We managed to keep our best kept secret. But Sheila is here with us in the front row.
So yeah, with this version of the Happiness Patrol, we were able to go back in and help the budget out a little bit and do some kind of world building. The other thing about the Happiness Patrol is there was so much shot that didn't end up in the finished episodes. There's, I think it's nearly 18 minutes of material that was cut for time, and that meant that the narrative suffered as a result, and particularly episode 1 is quite kind of choppy because it had to be, because it had to cut so much out. So we've been able to reinstate most of that material and help with new effects and build sequences before that they tried to realise on screen and couldn't because of time and money, but now we're able to do that.
So how did that footage survive? Was it unedited rushes?
Yeah, so we're really lucky with season 25. We have most of the original studio tapes still in existence. So
and what were they on?
They're on, is it?
Originally, was it 1 inch?
I think it was 1 inch or 2 inch. Is it 1 inch? I think it's 1 inch.
1 inch.
Yes.
Is that all?
Yes. So yeah, we had all the originals. So I had, you know, 60 hours of Happiness Patrol rushes to kind of go through, and
60 hours,
something like that. It was a phenomenal amount of stuff.
Oh, that's Christmas sorted.
So all of which is not on the Blu-ray, but a lot of it is. But that meant I was able to, you know, with digital editing these days, what they couldn't do in those days, you know, I can now do is go back and find particular shots that they couldn't quite kind of fix in the edit that I've managed to fix. The structure of part 1 is very, very different because there's a lot of cut material that's gone back in, and that necessitated a big kind of restructure of part 1. So it would feel quite different narratively, but feels is closer to the original script and just feels the pace is better, I think.
How did that affect the running time?
Well, every episode is at least kind of 30 minutes, so it's a true kind of special edition. And there are also a couple of big sequences in there as well that they didn't manage to realise because of time and money. So the Candyman's death, spoilers, was...
You've really not seen that?
Sorry. Candyman's death happened off screen. You know, you see him turn a corner and then suddenly he comes out of the chute in bits. But we were able to... I was really determined to kind of realise a sequence that did justice to that kind of moment for the first time.
So turning it into an X certificate?
Not quite that, but you know, just giving him a proper send-off because I think he deserved it. And there's lots of really great, funny. It's such a funny story as well as being dark. And, there's some great kind of one-liners that were cut from the Candyman at the time, and we were able to kind of put that stuff back in.
Well, the great news is after we've watched it, we're going to have Chris Thompson, who also kind of worked on it with special effects and models and stuff, to kind of give us a little bit more context once you've actually seen it.
Yeah,
but for the time being, a big thank you to People Time. One person who sadly can't be with us today is Graham Curry, who wrote the story. He passed away, as you probably know, a few years ago. But I'm so delighted that we have his family with him today. We have his wife Susan Robinson, and his daughter Laura. We just get you just whereabouts are you? Just Susan's written something she's asked me to read on her behalf before we watched the first episode, and I'm trying to say really, really grateful for you doing this. I know it must have taken a lot when you were having to revisit this all and stuff to put it together. But I'm going to read Susan's message, which is I didn't know Graham when he wrote The Happiness Patrol, and Laura, Graham's daughter, was only 18 months old when it was first broadcast. So our memories are of its afterlife in the 90s and beyond. I first met Graham in 1992 when Laura started at the same primary school as my son. I'd see him occasionally in the playground or at school fetes and sports days. I knew he was a writer, and I remember once saying breezily, "I hear you wrote an episode of Doctor Who," to which he replied yes, and everybody hated it. And later we became a couple. If it was ever mentioned in any context, he would visibly brace himself for what was about to be said, or what he was about to read, usually expecting to hear or see something damning or critical. He'd be relieved to find a neutral opinion and surprised at a positive one. The Happiness Patrol was always a part of Graham's life. He made lifelong friends through writing it, with Andrew Cartmel and other writers on the series. And it stayed with him in other small ways. Whenever he started a new job, for instance, within a couple of days, he'd get an email from at least one person asking, "Are you the Graham Curry who wrote The Happiness Patrol?" Followed by people turning up at his desk with copies of the book, video, or DVD for him to autograph. He was always a bit taken aback, but very happy to oblige. Graham always seemed to know when The Happiness Patrol had been mentioned in discussions of classic Doctor Who, probably through Andrew Cartmel, whether it was the Candyman/Bertie Bassett connection, or the Helen A/Mrs. Thatcher connection, or its popularity with LGBTQ+ fans. I remember Graham doing an interview for the Gay Times, who published an article with the title, "Is this the gayest Doctor Who?" He was amused to hear that the Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, had mentioned it in his Easter sermon in the context of David Cameron's Happiness Index and the definition of happiness. When Graham died in 2019, Laura and I saw lots of posts on Facebook and Twitter from people saying how much they'd admired The Happiness Patrol and how they wished he'd written more. I remember Laura asking me, "Do you think Dad realised how much people loved it?" She, like me, had heard him say the opposite so many times, but I think he did know there were true fans out there. In 2012, Graham attended a Doctor Who event, something he rarely did, which was a launch of the series on DVD. He packed his bag with a couple of books, a newspaper and his iPod, convinced that nobody would be interested in talking to him, and he'd be twiddling his thumbs all day. But when he came home, he told me he'd never had a moment to himself. He'd been signing autographs, having selfies taken, hearing lines from his script recited to him, and listening to fans telling him how much The Happiness Patrol meant to them, and how they loved to rewatch it. It was a real eye-opener for him, and he was very touched by the experience. I think he grew to have a more positive view of The Happiness Patrol in his later years than the one he had first expressed to me on that day in the school playground 20 years earlier. Laura and I are delighted to be here, but sad that Graham can't be here to share this day. Enjoy the show, and here's to Graham and The Happiness Patrol. Episodes of Happiness Patrol, and we'll see you after episode 2.
To have a great Fifi, which actually I think was originally going to be a person in a suit, and the pipe people were going to be puppets, and then it was swapped around.
So literally, in terms of your proximity to Sheila when you were operating Fifi, how exactly would it work? I mean, if Dick is Sheila now, would you literally be lying on the floor?
I'd be lying on the floor. I'd be leaning on his leg, or coming up between the legs and sort of doing this.
Between my legs.
Do you you come to audition for that particular role?
Well, I was straight in there. We made the puppet, and they said, well, you know, it's like a visual effect. So really, we were just manipulating it, if you like, rather than puppeteering it.
I thought the eyes were very good, and I wondered what the main bulk was made of.
The main bulk of it?
Yeah.
Oh, it was latex, the body. We had 2 or 3. There was one that had a working head, working eyes, but it was designed mainly to be taken in and out of the pipes and used in long shots and things like that. There's one that has an appear jet that's it's kind of on wheels that runs along the pipe at one point. But the main one, and the one that mostly is in the scenes with Sheila, it had moving ears, and it did a snarl, as you could see, and a blink mechanism. And the blink and eye mechanism really was lifted straight from the mechanisms that were in the spitting image puppets at the time, because that's where I was working as well as doing the Doctor Who. So, and those puppets were designed to last and be, you know, really robust. So we used a lot of those ideas on Fifi, because it actually gets quite a lot of a pounding. As you can see, it's blown up already. Then it gets rocks and things dropped on it, and then of course just dies in the end. So it's the big, I know.
So latex decomposes, doesn't it? So
yeah, it does. I mean, the face was foam, which flexes a lot better and more realistically. The body, because it needed to be a bit more robust, was latex. And for a long time, the puppet was in a lock-up that Susan and I shared and still do, and sort of squashed under a load of other props and moulds and things. And I saw it, I don't know, about 2 years ago or something like that, under a pile of things, and the face had started to rot away a bit round, because we had kind of gunk for the drool and all of this kind of thing. But the body was all intact, and as I was, the controls were sticking out of it, and I sort of tried the eyes, and it kind of just sort of blinked and looked up at me as if to say, because I was ready to throw it, really. And so I just thought, maybe it's worth restoring and bringing back. So, which is what I did.
Stephen, extraordinary things happen. I don't know if you noticed.
Oh wow!
In the last few minutes,
Oh, it's just turned up.
suddenly, miraculously, something has appeared, and I said, "Are you prepared to go and unwrap it for me,
No, I'm
please?"
unwrap it, yeah.
I wonder what it could be, everybody. Mr. Candyman back with us. It's the person from the BBC who didn't send us the right file in the stocks. And actually, it's interesting to Steve talking about, he worked in the Spitting Image days, which, and a lot of those puppets have not survived, to be honest. Well, here we are. I almost feel like we're there. So,
If anyone can see from there.
so you've got like a kind of a metal grip thing and a
There's a grip
rubber
there.
ball.
Yeah, basically these two things is what used to come out of. Okay, these two things are what used to come out of the old spit puppets, because it's got a very robust blink and eye mechanism in it. But I don't know if you can see. Genuinely, this was still working after I don't know how many years it was. So it kind of made me think, well, if that's lasted, I might as well try and do something. The great thing about the air thing, it's not very long here, but it means you're free to operate other bits of it, and you can do that bit with your foot and so on. It's a very clever mechanism. It has a little air bladder inside that does the trick. So yeah, that was it. So still working, at least that part of it. There's a couple of spitting image heads, a lot of Doctor Who molds, obviously, and things like that. And we did a character for one of the stories called the Destroyer, which is like a blue devil sort of thing, and I still have the head for that. And that is the same sort of thing. It's got a foam face, but that really has gone quite crispy now. So you can't move it. If you move it, little bits of dust come off it.
It's been so fascinating. A big thank you for being here.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Big thank you to Stephen Mansfield and Fifi.
I have to have a cushion, so I'm not as spry as I was at that.
Next we have one of the most loved companions from the entire time on Doctor Who history. Please join in welcoming Sophie Aldred. Doctor himself, Sylvester McCoy. Well, thank you all of you for being here today, and obviously we had Fifi on stage earlier. And that's a heartbreaking moment, I have to say. Poor Fifi, Sheila.
Yes, I know. I have to say, I remember doing that and not knowing what was happening. Unbelievable, they really were.
Well, all three departments worked in tandem, which was a joy. It doesn't always happen that
But
way.
you shot it beautifully, darling.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, some of those shots. I always say this about all popular television. Everybody doesn't. Well, Doctor Who does get acclaimed, but some of the series like Coronation Street and things like that, they are marvellous performances, beautifully shot. I mean, I always quote Vera. You know, it's a police series, but my God, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you see, on this, you've got top quality. You're good too, Dom. You play the spoons as well, don't you?
My one talent.
So I'm going to start off maybe down there with Sylvester and Sophie. I wonder if you just share your initial kind of... Why not, Andrew?
Shout out to Dominic Glynn, who did fantastic music.
I was going to ask maybe if Sylvester and Sophie, you could just share with us some of your initial thoughts, having just watched it on the big screen with an audience all these years later. What your kind of feelings were, you know, whether you're kind of proud of the work, and if any kind of initial memories have been kind of stirred that you hadn't expected to have thought about.
Well, while I was watching, I kept wondering, who is that chap? I recognise him. It was great fun. Well, it was all great fun. Every one of the stories were just great fun. We had such fun making it. We were definitely, we'd never got sent away for being miserable. It was terrific, really. It's you've got to think a lot and go back to it. I mean, it just the energy that was in it was great. It was great energy. And the Candyman, I didn't realise how brilliant he was.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a huge part. I only had those scenes with him, you know, and I never kind of, when it came out, I used to hide behind the couch when I came on. So those scenes, you see, so...
But the moral content of it was so wonderful too.
It was,
story.
and it's still...
The whole thing about happiness, I do hate happy people. Sort of people. There's boring people who see the best side of it. Really even having a good mood.
But it is still so relevant.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
some of those lines you could just, you know, you could see in a drama today and go, oh, yeah, that's very current.
But it was quite a complex moral story, wasn't it? I mean, you people who know about Dr. Who so well, I mean, it just the complexity of the idea. I mean, and I seem to remember I halfway through decided it and might put on a voice a bit like Thatcher. I don't know whether it was the entire idea of it, but it did. It does sum up the dreadful period, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The ugliness of that period.
All the power of Graham Curry.
And believing they're right. You know, believing.
That's exactly what
Was it? Did he intend it to be Thatcher, or was that me?
Yes. And so he intended it, but never told you that, so you wanted to know about
Oh, right.
So
Oh,
it's
right.
fantastic.
Right. But I believed, I remember, although I never followed the plot. Those little people that came on the end, who the hell were they? Marvelous make-ups, but where did they come from? I so believed in what he was saying. I really did believe in what he was saying. Sorry,
No.
short term.
Actually, you were actually called onto Newsnight, weren't you, recently? Can you tell us about that?
Recently, it was about 10 years ago. but it was decades ago, the show went out, decades ago. But what happened was, there's always was, we had the right wing press from knocking the BBC.
No, I got
Somebody made wind of this, because
Well, I told him, I
my job interview, right?
Oh, right, no, about the Thatcher thing, I told them, right, they phoned up to ask me why David Tennant wasn't doing Doctor Who with a Scottish accent. And that was where the conversation started, and then it started.
No, but they sold it to us as being something completely different. So that, you know, these rather loathsome journalists. So they spoke to Sylvester and they got wind of the possibility of a BBC knocking the story. So they got in touch with me. It was presented to me as being sort of a follow-up to talking to Sylvester. But what they wanted me to say was about how anti-Thatcherite I was, which I was. So the slant of the story was left-wing pinkos in the BBC.
Yes, I'm proud to say.
Undermining. Years later, and they.
But it happened at the time. I remember being accused at the time.
Yeah. But decades later, they were still banging on about it.
But I think it was also partly not liked by the Doctor Who fans, because it was not the usual Dalek story, was it?
I think people saw the surface, the camp surface, and they didn't realise, they didn't see the evil underneath, they didn't stay to see what the point it was making.
I'm interested to what the modern Doctor Who fans think.
You'll let us know.
Does anybody object to it? Seriously, does anybody say that it doesn't follow the Doctor Who genre? But it is a bit
I guess it wouldn't have paid to be here today.
It's daringly different. But I think people, also at the time, Doctor was constantly accused of being camp. And so people just saw the camp surface. They didn't stay to see what, the powerful dark story, the real story that Graham engineered for us.
It was ultra camp. Oh my God. That is the definition of camp. Everything about it, the causes, the performances, everybody's over the top.
And the big TARDIS.
Yes.
And that was the brilliance of it, because you've got this surface glitter and niceness, and it's deeply evil.
Evil, deep, evil and worrying, and it sums up life in a funny way.
Pink and red costumes instead of the black Gestapo, but it is the Gestapo.
Yeah.
So that was the brilliance to conceive.
Let's
But
bring
the one
Sophie in. I
thing
know
that I
Sophie.
dispute is, if they were so happy, why didn't she paint the walls pink?
Well, I think that they landed in the ghetto.
Oh, I didn't get that.
Check the script to make sure. What it is that that's the bad part of town.
Oh, I see. So they don't see the glamour.
And also, it's taking place at night because we very deliberately wanted to kind of film the whole field.
Really?
Which
Is it right at one point you were going to film it in black and white? Was that a possibility?
No.
Yes, I was told this afterwards, that they were going to do it in black and white and do film noir angles. And I thought, I wish I'd found that out. I would have gone in and begged them to do it, because at that time, I mean, the colour television was, really established. But my two young sons were 12 and 11, and they were starting to get into black and white. And I thought, they are. They're ready now for black and white.
We were thinking of the third man, you see, because we did have the cameras. We did have the cameras on a tilt. At the beginning, which was the first kind of murder scene and all the rest of it. And so the right camera was tilted that way, the left camera was tilted that way, and the middle camera was straight on. So it worked for a while.
So you had static cameras in those days, pushed around.
You moved around. So we did that for a bit, and then we were falling rather behind schedule when Johnson was nightmare.
But it's also like the Muzak, is that you eventually have to drop it out because it's just too much. It's a good idea, but it's too much.
Good idea to blow it up.
I really want to bring Sophie into the
sorry.
because on a few occasions she's almost got her words out and so much excitement here and to remember. But Sophie, I wonder if you can share some of your because obviously you were still, although it's the second series, you were still really establishing yourself as an actress, and obviously you'd taken over this role during the first part of the first series. But this is properly your moment now in this series, wasn't it?
Well, I think by the Happiness Patrol I felt very comfortable. I mean, I have to use this moment to thank Chris, who would not be here today without this man, is Chris Clough.
What's good for you?
And then Sylvester and I mean, we got on so well right from the beginning.
Yes.
And you were so generous with allowing us to develop a story together in our relationship. That I actually felt very comfortable, and I have seen some outtakes actually from that, the Candy Kitchen scene where I'm chucking you the
That's a great throw, by the way.
Luckily I didn't catch it by the
But I've seen the outtakes, and I was actually being incredibly I don't want to say bossy, because that's a sort of word women, and I think but I was saying, look, if you do this and then I'll do that, and I was basically directing from the door.
That's all right.
It's
So
only 12.
We touched on it when we talked at the start, but obviously it feels to me as if if Graham had been here today, he would have been so proud, and we talked about obviously the fact that he had which actually is a sad thing, because actually a lot of people do love the story.
But I do think the expanded edition will show his writing off to an even better advantage, because there's a lot of things there that were just tags of scenes, which will make a whole lot more sense, and also more of his brilliant dialogue, like a knife through butterscotch. Now that's fantastic.
I also think that because in the script he'd written this evil, he was going to be a sort of kind of nasty looking character, and then it kind of the whole Bertie Bassett thing blew up, and there was real trouble because of copyright and things like that. And
Who could have seen that coming?
I'm not quite sure how we got that far to shoot it.
But it's great. I think it's better. It's better than the concept of the script. I love the Bertie Bassett thing.
In Canada, did you have Bertie Bassett?
But I was born in England, buddy.
No, in Canada you grew up there, so that's fine. So you didn't have Bertie Bassett.
That's your question.
So, well that's it then. You weren't frightened. You just say, oh, but put it on, and then you go away with it.
And it wasn't the kids off liquids all sorts, so wasn't it?
Well, they went absolutely nuts after it went out.
Did they?
Yes. There was all sorts of lawsuits.
I wonder why.
Well, I would have thought they'd been delighted.
The guy in the Candyman costume is so great, and the dialogue is so great, because I remember there's a point where he had to answer the phone, and how does the Candyman answer the phone? No, just not physically, but what does he say? So I rang up Graham, and Graham said, oh, it just said, Candyman.
It was a wonderful group of daft actors.
Yeah, it was pretty
Harold
good.
Innocent and Ronnie Fraser.
John Normington, Ronald as well as
Ronnie Fraser, who was off the booze at that time, but
Yes, he was ill while he was.
And all the girls were absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
They were
I
fantastic.
seem to remember Georgina she was training them, like she was.
Well, she thought she was the boss. Well, she was really in the story. So
Yeah.
she took over as sergeant in arms.
Yeah.
Which was great.
But
Georgina
it's
Hill,
great parts for women,
Yeah.
for a change, as you
Yeah.
rightly said, darling.
Yeah.
You know, the women are written, I mean,
Yeah.
masterful and
Yeah.
fantastic.
in control and all that.
Look, I've got to say, you were wonderful in that. You're just so great.
Yeah, I seem to remember I did enjoy it, but I was always puzzled.
Curious.
Ronnie and Ronnie Fraser didn't have the slightest idea. He said, "Where are we now?" I don't know, it looks those are the sweets all round. And we just...
But you had a strong grasp of the character.
Yeah,
That's all
well,
that it took.
I liked what it was saying.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's probably what attracted me, that I was so angry about what was happening in our country that
As was
I liked the idea
Yeah.
of it being illustrated in a popular piece
Yeah.
that turned out to be not popular to be. I think it's a classic bit of cinema, don't you?
Yeah.
I honestly do.
Because at the time I do remember people uniformly didn't like it, and it really got a lot of flack, and we were defending it and defending it, and then gradually going to signings and conventions over the years people have come up and said it's my favourite story, and I remember being quite taken aback at first, and it was usually the younger generation who were coming to it for the first time and saying,
Well, they like sweets.
and pink. But I think gradually it has been completely reevaluated, and quite rightly so, and I just wish that Graham would see it to enjoy this.
It's incredibly relevant now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. It's full of, you keep going, oh gosh, the bits of it. Extraordinary. I mean, it's extraordinary. I was all right watching. I've never watched myself, but I mean, this one I got really engrossed in it. And I was just looking at the composition, and occasionally it looked like a modern art. Like if you took the frame out, it would be a modern picture. It really would.
I've been a very good girl, and I've read my latest edition of Doctor Who magazine. And there's a brilliant interview with John Astridge, the designer, in that.
That's great.
Yeah. And he talks about the fact that, or somebody talks about the fact that all the fronts were meant to be facades in that set to these crumbling buildings behind.
Like a New Orleans kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why they were like that, but it doesn't kind of quite come across on camera because they look a bit too much like some stage sets.
Well, I thought the lighting needed to be. I didn't think they had the best lighting.
Well, the trouble is you're in a multi-camera environment, and trying to get it actually that low was a miracle, really.
I'm so glad you did that.
So he donned it as well as he could in the time. Nowadays, obviously, you'd like all sorts of things much better and more sympathetic.
We all forget what the cameras were like in those days. They were Daleks
Great
in
big.
themselves, pushed around.
I know.
They were like Daleks.
Yeah, and you commentaries, you
time.
had 5 of them,
Yeah.
and they were cutting like, as they go on the thing.
So that you had to light for 5 cameras rather than for 1.
That's right.
Yeah, and as I said, no time, no money. And then today, when the wrong files turn up, I felt quite nostalgic.
I thought it was really quite different. I won't share that with you.
So they've done to jazz it up. The version we did
What you would have seen was more special effects, more like there was some models replacing some of the existing sort of space scenes, and
Do the cars go any faster?
Yes, they do. They do.
You will
True
keep
Mad
that
Max
version
style.
though, won't you?
Yeah, so obviously they'll coexist. There'll be the original edition and the new edition. Some people will gravitate towards whichever one they want to. I want to, Chris, I'd just ask you about the fact that you worked a number of different Doctor Who stories over a few years, and this one definitely, despite you've got the Candyman and these kind of fun elements, actually it's probably one of the darker stories actually when you kind of boil it down.
Yes, I think that's true, and that's how we felt about it. That's why we went for a really positive set. we were never outdoors, so you didn't have that
completely all
lightness.
studio, wasn't it?
All studio.
The last studio-bound Doctor Who completely sort of boomed 35 years later, apparently.
Right, yeah.
But no, that's not right, because Ghostlight was too.
Was this film?
Because every year, because John Nathan Turner was great with money, he had a budget where he could do a 6-parter, which was part OP, outside broadcast, and part on the studio. But he thought that's very boring. Split it into 2 3-parters, one of which is all the shot on location, one which is all studio, more or less. So each of the 3 seasons I worked on, we had that.
Was there nothing outside in Ghostlight at all?
No. There was one shot, external shot.
Yeah, I think there might be one external shot.
Yeah, so that's why, and therefore you make it dark. Like you can't just have dark on dark on dark, because it will get very gloomy, which is why we then zhuzhed up the costumes and the makeup and the other stuff to counteract that. It was kind of New Orleans stroke crumbling Venice sort of. Was,
yeah, Venice, that's right. I remember discussion.
Yeah.
But that was when the BBC had a makeup department.
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be possible to do
I know, because
that
there was a lot of wiggery going on in your white faces, and everybody was a bit in revolt about what's it going to do to my skin? What's in this thing? There was a lot of that going.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by my nails.
They were good, weren't they? They looked very modern, as if you'd been down to the Vietnamese.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. I just thought.
Just so have it.
I thought something. No, I didn't get into it. I did, but I just think it was stunning to look at.
Yeah.
I really did, and I kind of understood why you're all such fans of Doctor Who. There's a moral content there that is really, it's subtle, but it clouds you.
We've got a new fan.
Sylvester and Sophie, one thing that had every story, and this was obviously no exception, was that you'd have this incredible guest cast around you who would come in, and you'd have people who were recognisable for lots of different reasons. Some of them might be TV comedians, some of them might be film actors.
Ken Dodd.
You had Ken Dodd and all sorts of people. But I wonder, from your point of view, how kind of proprietorial you felt about the fact that it was kind of your show, and that every week you were the kind of the one thing that stayed the same, and how easy the guest artists made it for you as well.
Well, my philosophy, because I guested in other programs before I got there, and normally you'd be in the rehearsal studios, and the clique would down there, and you'd be sitting there waiting for your bit, and then you go, well, I made my decision when I got there, this was going to be the utter opposite. And Sophie and I worked our butts off to make sure. Anton Diffring arrived miserable from the south of France. I'm only here. I'm doing this show because I want to, because of Wimbledon. And he was, by the end of it, he was smiling. And that was our job. And we had this job: make sure everyone has a really good time. And the other day I saw Chunky Williams, Simon, and he said something and very nice to me, and he said that I was a very good captain and I ran a really good ship and a happy ship.
That's absolutely true, and I can commend you absolutely for that, because you, as you say, everything is correct. You have the hierarchy, and the stars, the original, and they like buggery, and then last on the set, you're the opposite of that. You're absolutely brilliant.
And I have to say, Sylvester's passed that down the line, because doing Power of the Doctor with Jodie was exactly the same. It was.
Jodie was great.
She wanted everybody to be having a party.
Yeah, having a fun.
And it makes it fun, and you can see it in the performances, and everybody just goes that extra bit mile, and they stick their neck out, they be brave, and not frightened of failure.
I'm a bit nervous of that word fun.
Are you killjoy?
Oh, so many people. You do a big musical, work your arse off 8 shows a week, and for 18 months or something, which I've done. And somebody comes up and says, oh, it must be such fun. You look as though you're having the most wonderful fun. I'm the punch. It's not a hobby. I do it for a living.
I'll tell you
It
the
was only for
person,
2 weeks, sorry, we only did it for 2 weeks.
the person who wasn't having so much fun as we were, if we were, was David John Pope. Poor thing, who was in the Candyman costume.
Oh, God.
He had rehearsed, he's very tall and slender, and he'd rehearsed this fantastic voice in the rehearsal studio, and he'd done all these kind of movements like this, and then I don't think he'd seen the costume until he actually went to the studio, and he was like sort of put into it like this. I remember him sitting, well, he couldn't even sit, he was leaning against something, and they were trying to feed him water through a straw and try somehow to get a fan in there. And then he mentioned that he needed to actually go to the toilet after about 12 hours or something like that. So they had to try and handle that. I still don't know the details of that, but yeah, it wasn't fun for him.
No, I bet it wasn't. Well, some of the others as well. Their costumes were anchored.
Yeah.
Andrew.
I had that man between my legs the whole time.
It's very good.
It was honestly, he was literally there, his hand was there. It was this animal. I must say, I did feel in love with that animal, it was sweet.
I remember, yes, I do remember you loving it.
I thought
Sheila, because it's a great prosthetic puppet, but it's you sell it, because your emotion sells it, so it makes it real to the audience.
Yeah.
I get tears in my eyes every time Fifi dies.
But it's so good at the end, isn't it, that this woman cries as an animal. Yeah.
It's very true to life with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Dennis, her own feet being a better song.
Well, I thought Dennis was her
Yes,
Fraser.
Yeah, Ron, you're right.
There were moments in it when I was sort of going, because of the relevance for that period and for this period. Marvellous, so well done him. Why?
And Andrew, one of the things I know that was really important to you as script editor was to bring in kind of, or, you know, to try out new writers, which is a very brave thing to do when you've got an established show like Doctor Who. It could have completely backfired, but actually, without that, we wouldn't have these amazing stories.
Well, Graham sent in a radio play about football, so that what could be less Doctor Who than that? But it just showed real talent. And then I discovered that he'd written his university thesis on the grotesque in literature. And I thought, so suddenly I could see that there was a way in for this guy. And it took a long time for him to come up with an idea, and he was actually losing heart. He kept pitching ideas to all. One day he came in and said, what about a story about a planet where it's a crime to be unhappy? Because it's the sort of parable that's perfect Doctor Who shape. And I knew from that moment on, although there was a lot of work and a lot of hassle and a lot of tribulation, I knew that concept was so strong and such a Doctor Who idea. It's a Who-ish idea. So I knew that it would work in the end, and it did, thanks to his brilliance.
And while this was all going on, the background, despite the fact that obviously you're working away, filming the stories and doing your best, in the background, John Nathan Turner was doing quite a lot of batting in terms of there was a lot of pressure on whether the show was going to succeed or continue or survive or not. And this obviously was a penultimate. How much, Sylvester, were you aware of that going on, or were you sort of cushioned from all of that?
Yeah, the cushioning, I had no idea.
Really?
When we did that, the last scene in Survival, that speech that Sonny handed me, they handed me a speech, and I said, learn that, do that, and we did it. And I just thought it was a lovely speech to go off in. Didn't realise the end speech, saying goodbye.
And was that the same for you, Sophie? Were you completely oblivious to the fact that this was going on?
Well, we filmed Survival, and then we went back into the studio to do the largely studio-based So the very last scene of all that was filmed from the classic series was Catherine Schlesinger and Sylvia Sims turning to stone, which was
suspended animation.
Quite weird.
Spooky, yeah.
And then we all went downstairs to one of those horrible rooms at the BBC, the B something or other it was called, in the basement, and had our jolly party. And said, see you next term, because it was a bit like a school trip.
I mean, what happened was that later in the year, TNT phoned me up and said, hello, I've just I just phoned you up to tell you I sent you a letter. I thought, that was weird. He said, okay, thanks, I'll look out for it. He said, well, I may as well tell you what's in it. And so he read it, and they said the BBC have decided they want to put it into, what was it? Hiatus for a while. That was it. 9 years later, they brought it back.
That's how they told you?
Yeah.
And then you rang me.
Yes, and I rang to told Sophie. They hadn't told me, they hadn't communicated with us that way.
They're not good at sucking people, are they?
But it was, for a while, we went, we sort of blamed John or kind of, but it wasn't he, it turns out, had been he put his whole career, the executive producer, John Nathan Turner.
Oh, right.
The guy with the curly hair and Hawaiian shirt.
And the cigarette. And the vodka.
But he'd actually stayed on to save Doctor Who past his sell-by date, because he then never really did anything again after that.
Really?
Because the BBC didn't think that much of him.
But who knew all those years later that with the, what number Doctor was due to Jodie Whittaker? 13. With the 13th Doctor, that he would be back again as Ace. It's an extraordinary thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Chris, as well as you look through your CV and you see all the producing and directing credits, and it's a pretty prestigious document. But I don't think anything could have been probably a prouder moment for you than voicing the character of Phoebe. you do in the Death Throes.
Oh, do I?
I believe so.
Oh, I couldn't even remember that.
Is that correct?
Another of my skills, yes. Turn out and do that.
And,
right.
And who are some of the directors that have, as well as you, that have worked on it, and writers over the years? Often
I guess the classics like kind of Terence Dicks and Ben Aronovich, obviously brought in for the Dalek story, didn't you? And
Robert Holmes was the great doctor.
Right. But they've always had wonderful writers, haven't they?
And also, there's the newscast from the show was Annie Hulley.
That's right.
How did you find her?
Oh, really? Yes. Well, she was fine because she was actually pregnant at the time with my daughter. Well, my son's here as well. He was born when we were doing the story before. So
is there a connection in your family now with the show?
The age group. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So when did this one happen? Was this before?
1988.
So it was before they stopped it.
The year after was the last series. Yes, this is the last.
I was going to say it's not this one that finished.
Very nearly, but it was
The Doctor Who has always been a hotbed of media interest, hasn't it? The tabloids over the years have sold more copies of the back of Doctor Who probably than apart from Princess Diana, anything else. And that continues to be the case now. And there's also, I guess, there's a lot of stuff around what was acceptable or not in terms of censorship and whether it's a children's program or a family show. How did this rate in that respect?
Well, we were in the drama series and serials, as it was called then, department, but they thought we were a children's show, so there was an awful lot of negativity. Even in the building, you know. So were you working on the documentary?
When I got my job, I got a job at script editing BBC of Doctor Who, and somebody in the BBC heard about it. They met me as a writer. They said, "Oh, you're working here." I said, "Yeah, I'm Doctor Who," and so on.
Yeah. And then you look at this, shows that these guys, these sort of knobs were sort of all forgotten, and the 90% were terrible. And we had more fun making this. Sorry to use it.
When was the first Doctor Who?
1963.
63 was it?
Directed by Worse, you asked about directors, Worse has sang.
Oh,
yeah.
Verity Lambert.
Yes, Verity Lambert.
Yeah, and Verity, yes. God, it was good people all of them, weren't they?
It was founded on a very solid premise, which was terrific, and that's the key to
a lot of talent,
Yeah, I believe Harold Wilson had something. No, Harold Wilson, yeah. Prime Minister had something to do with it. He made a speech about the white heat of technology, and they approached the BBC and said, would you make a programme for children with science in it? And they came up with Doctor Who. Yeah, that's how it started.
This has been great, both a great celebration of the happiness patrol, but also a lesson for Sheila and others in the show illustration. There is time for some audience questions if people would like. There are microphones outside. Is there anybody on this side who has a question or in that kind of area there? Like no? Okay. We'll just pass the microphone over to them. And then there's some hand on the back over here. Yeah. Let's start over here first.
I'm going to be a little bit naughty. It's less of a question. More just an observation.
Who is speaking at the moment? Oh, you're over there. Stand up! So we're at the very, very back there, okay. It's far, far back.
Sorry, I can't stand up. I'm going to walk and sit. Sadly, Sylvester, I'm a little bit heavier than you.
Okay, so what's the not question?
Well, I was sort of like, at the time, didn't read it and didn't like it. I was 11 years old when this was broadcast. I was key demographic, and I thought it was bloody brilliant at the time. And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people here that agree with that. So I don't know really why there was where the negativity came from.
I guess the media amounts for a lot, and I guess if you were saying that the BBC didn't necessarily value their own show, so I guess
they didn't know at all.
Some high forehand about John's tenure.
Yeah, right. And I guess they were quite vocal.
Yeah, they heard it was called Happiness Patrol, so it sold at a good time. They didn't look any further.
Local Doctor Who fans. Who
Michael Gray dines out on the fact that he killed it. He's a liar. Because what happened was he took it off, and then John Nathan Turner took him to America, because John was trying to break into America, and showed him the interest there. So Michael Gray came back and brought it back, and I was his doctor.
Yeah.
And then he left to join TV and radio, television 4.
Channel 4, yeah.
Channel 4. He went off to Channel 4, so it had nothing to do with the death of it.
It was actually, wasn't it Peter Grugin who was head of series and series, and he decided that he was going to get rid of Doctor Who and bring back his own fantastic production. Spend a lot of money on it, and it was going to be this great new series, and it was called El Dorado.
Okay, there's a question over here, yeah.
Hello.
Okay, she's right on the very, very far side over there.
Hi.
Far right.
First of all, thank you very much for all the contributions that you made to this serial, because it was amazing. I'm 24, I'm a Gen Z fan, and I've kind of been taken aback a little bit by how in the last 5-6 years there's been a lot of complaints about how quote-unquote political Doctor Who can be, especially when serials like this. I wanted to ask you all about the importance of putting messages and moral cores into shows, and why we do it, and why do we put it into popular television, do you think?
Well, in the 60s, I was watching, I got hooked on Doctor Who, and the reason why it was because of the politics in it, subtly put there. The 60s, it started to swing, we started to change, it was a kind of a revolution, a peaceful, wonderful revolution going on, and Doctor Who was the only decent thing on Auntie at the time that had anything that talked to young people like me and in a political way. So it's always been political as far as I'm concerned.
I think we got the answer right here at the end. Next to the end. Well, you know.
Well, I think, like anything else, you have to do things which.
Oh, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office.
Yeah.
Yes, I was being a bit thick.
Yeah.
I do think that's the most important television drama, literally decades.
When you worked on
powerful.
Brookside, which I did Brookside in the early days was very much about the social commentary.
Well, in the 60s, you had Alvin Rakoff, you had all those people, and Ken Loach, and all that. So
if you do drama without any purpose, then it disappears into the ether, and it's just bubblegum. So every drama has to sort of have power, which is the message, and that means it has to have some political debate going on with it. Otherwise, what else is it about, really? It's about people's struggles against something, or about trying to make the most of their lives. If something comes against you, and that's
this debate has really landed. It's really made a difference, and I'm very, very.
Well, I know, it's amazing.
It's incredible.
But the arts generally have always been. Well, strangely enough, I'm just writing something at the moment, and something I've forgotten about. At the end of the war, in 1951, we had the Festival of Britain, and it was an absolute celebration of this dying country, this bankrupt country, of the arts and science and creativity, and it was splendid. It wasn't just in London, wasn't just the festival hall, it was all around the three nations. And it wouldn't happen now. Do you know what I mean? But it's there.
Yeah.
We are a cultured country.
We're very creative.
And creative. But the cultures are ignored. Politicians, I mean, when I say Nadine Dorries was Secretary of Culture, kind of sums it up, doesn't it? And now this government, I noticed Keir has once or twice mentioned theatre. And hopefully, I think the only person who goes to the theatre or knows anything about music is our King, strangely enough, who actually does seem to know a bit about it. But that's what we have to do. And that's what arts and the post-office thing and all that does. It tells the nation what's happening.
Exactly.
And it's our duty to do that.
Okay, so we'll go over here first, we'll go with that.
Hi. I just wanted to say I think Happiness Patrol is one of the best Doctor Who stories. And a lot of people, as speakers have alluded to, have said it's not been very popular for a number of years, but I think it's one of the most successful Doctor Who stories there have ever been. It's the only Doctor Who story that can claim that it's been the subject of a Newsnight investigation. It's the only Doctor Who story that's been threatened with legal action by a major provider of confectionery goods. It's the only Doctor Who story to have been used in the promotion of the highest grossing film of the past year, which is the Barbie movie, thanks to the pink TARDIS. And it's the only Doctor Who story to have manifested the downfall of Margaret Thatcher. So I just wanted to ask you...
Archbishop of Canterbury.
And the Archbishop of Canterbury, of course. So what do you think are the successes of the Happiness Patrol?
Well, I think it all comes down to language. It all stems from this.
Yeah, I think the writer is the key to it all.
Okay, we'll come back. So there's a question over there already, and then we'll come down to the third row from the front and the middle. Where are you, whoever is the first?
Just wondering from like a technical standpoint, was that guy actually playing the harmonica during all of that?
Okay, he did play the harmonica, but then it was dubbed over by a more proficient harmonica player. No, but I mean, he played it okay, but we wanted a virtuoso player playing Dominic's themes that he can.
And that is the character that still mystifies me. Suddenly there's this bloke going, who's he?
Maybe it's explained more in the extended version.
Good question down here.
Hiya, so I've got a little remark here. Hi. Hi, we're from the Netherlands, so I just want to say hello.
Very good.
And also I just want to thank everyone on the stage and also everyone here in the room who's worked on Doctor Who, because I just think it's an absolutely fabulous thing to have everyone bond together. And I just think, what is it that, looking back so many years later, is the biggest thing that you all got out of working on Doctor Who?
A pension.
conventions. I've travelled all over the world. Been to Brazil, Australia, all English-speaking places, and I was on the Trans-Siberian Express in Siberia, and a Dalek popped up. It's amazing.
I don't get any of that.
Obviously, you're known for so many different roles, but do people ever come and talk about Doctor Who with you?
Me?
Yeah.
I have to be honest, no. It's a bloody long time ago.
They don't recognise that.
Doctor Who fans.
Yeah.
I mean, always, if I'm in the theatre or anything, the people at the stage door are always Doctor Who fans. Hundreds of books and pictures and things like that. Yeah.
Might be a few of those today. And I know, once again, Andrew, you've got your violent detective books and all sorts of other stuff, and Chris, obviously, we talked about. What is there still a very high proportion of kind of recognition for you in Doctor Who?
Well, the thing is, once it's on your CV, it's brilliant because people know it, right? Even people who haven't seen it on the other side of the world do know about Doctor Who, which is brilliant.
There are some people who do spend part of their career trying to distance themselves from the show.
Well, yeah, and I can understand that because I find it a very negative effect on my career. Yeah. And the Doctor Who thing, you know, I think it's a bit of a career killer for a lot of directors as well.
Really?
Yeah.
It used to be for actors. It used to be for actors because.
I find it hard. There's you've done Doctor Who.
But generally, telly in the old days was not as good as film.
Exactly, yes. So there was a snobbish against.
But that's changed totally.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because Doctor Who has a global audience.
Yeah.
And the people who watch the show, so many of them, they do a huge amount to them. They've literally, it's saved them at times when they've had real lows in their lives, and they've been able to transport themselves into different worlds through the world you've created. I think, you should never forget that. Actually, what you've done is very important.
Well,
it's also crazy because I imagine if you're directing Doctor Who, you've got so many different elements to deal with that you don't get in, like.
That was the reason that I wanted to do it and loved doing it. It was just fantastic because the other shows I was directing EastEnders at the time in the early days. As you say, I'd started Brookside, which was another great action show of mine as well, and got that up and running. But then the rest of it was kind of Bergerac or
But wasn't it because of being thought of in a rather snotty way?
Yes.
Rather than just Doctor Who?
Yeah, I'm more of a telly person. I tried my go at filmmaking and ended up virtually bankrupt.
But I mean, my husband John Thor, he used to get so angry that even towards the end of his life, people called him a telly actor.
I know. There's a huge difference.
You're an actor, and it's an actor.
Yeah, you're in film or you're in television or you're in commercials.
Or theatre. Theatre's the top.
And we all borrow from the theatre, but the other three strands are completely separated.
Yeah.
They've sort of merged now. We're all dealing.
Oh, very much so now. I mean, people fight to do telly. You've got big stars doing telly now. I think that started with George Clooney actually, because he did a soap, didn't he?
Yeah.
But it's a funny old snobby business, our business.
It is.
It really is.
Doctor Who really suffered from that snobbishness.
Did it? I didn't do enough of it to realise.
I think we have time for one final question, and my eyes immediately caught by the very, very front row in the middle, for obvious reasons.
I just wondered if there was ever a discussion of forcing Ace into some pink.
Putting Ace into the pink costume. I don't think so.
No, never.
That's what you did with girls.
No,
pink.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like both Sylvester and Sophie, that you had a sense of ownership about your characters, and that you did have the opportunity. If you really believed that something wasn't the way that your character would go, you could have that argument with you.
I think that's right, yes. And there was a respect for, especially for these two, as they were in it every time, and therefore we were involved with costumes and, the makeup choices and all that. But it was very specific, Ace's sort of look. Because I always seem to remember the first time I met you, you were in bike leathers, but
You're obsessed with my bike leathers. I think the reason why you cast me, you popped into John Nathan Turner's office when I was talking to him and said, with my publicity photo, where my agent had written, has own leathers on the back. I said, she has her own leathers.
Well, it was that, you must be proud of that.
Yes, I think it's absolutely
You know,
fantastic.
whatever anybody thinks.
I was looking forward to seeing what Pete and the guys had done. Even then, I thought, well, actually, you know, they're laughing in the right places.
Yeah.
They're getting it. The shots are solid. The cues are working well.
Absolutely.
So I was just going to say, Andrew, you had an opportunity to revisit this, didn't you, in kind of cartoon form, as a sort of, you did a prequel.
Yeah, I wrote a comic strip called The Death of Figure, which I wanted to really do a good job because I felt I owed it to Graham. I wanted to sort of honour the spirit of the story. So it was the origin story of your character and where she came from, why she was where she was.
Oh, really? Right. Great.
Well, that is where we are going to end up. It's been, despite a few teething problems here and there, an absolutely amazing event, and I'm so grateful to you all for being with us there and our previous guests. I know you're going to go and do a signing afterwards, so thank you for that. A big, big thank you. Sylvester, Sophie.